Now let me tell you how I learned about reviving life in the body. I was only 13 years old. My mother asked Judge Charles Baker to let me go to camping in the mountain with the Boy Scouts. Mr. Baker was head of the Scout movement. He believed in America and wanted the boys to be true Americans. He selected good scoutmasters to teach the boys. It was in this camping on Cheat River I learned how to remove water from a drowned person and restore breathing by laying the person on their back, bring the arms up over the head and down in the stomach. Now let us go back to Mrs. Robinson lying dead in the upper room. She was lying on her back, arms along the side. In my despair, I prayed to God to give me knowledge to make her live again. I called down the steps to Millie Moreland to come upstairs. When Millie looked at Gladys, she began to cry. I asked Millie not to cry. I need your help, Millie. If it is God's will for her to be dead, so be it. I have asked God to give me knowledge to make her live again. Millie stopped crying. She was only 12 years old. She asked, "What can I do?" Without thinking, I said, "You rub her feet and legs." Millie said, "If I rub her feet with salt, will that help?" In my despair, I said yes. I tried to move Gladys's right arm. It was frozen stiff. I was up over Gladys on the bed. Without thinking what to do, I placed my left knee in her right arm on the inside of the elbow and took hold of her hand with both of mine. Very carefully, I pulled up on her arm, slow, steady at first. It seemed almost impossible. I pulled hard, then the arm started a slow rise. My knee was still inside at the elbow. I pulled the arm up and pushed the arm back down. Each time I brung the arm up and down, it moved easier. Now the knee I had placed in the arm was removed, and after a few hard tries, the arm could be moved up and down. Each time the arm was moved up over the head, it was easier, but stiff. I was nearly exhausted. I could hardly breathe. I could not go on. I run down the steps, out in the kitchen, to get water. The water bucket was empty. I jerked open the back door and run to the well, dropped the bucket down in the water and turned the crank, bringing up the bucket of water. I upped the bucket of water, drank what I could. I could breathe now. Running back up the steps to Gladys, I climbed back on the bed over Gladys and grabbed her hand. It was no use. The arm was frozen again. Please, God. Please, God. How I needed his help. I placed my left knee back in the arm, and using the same knee in the arm method, the arm soon was free and easy to move. Millie moved this arm up and down and did a good job keeping the arm from freezing stiff. I used the same knee in the arm method to overcome the freeze in the left arm. Now I could bring both arms up over the head and down in the stomach. I looked down at Millie, was pouring salt over Gladys's feet and legs and rubbing with her small hands hard and fast. I brung the arms up over the head and down, up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. No signs of life. Then something happened. I felt a sort of superpower in my body. I stood up on my feet on the bed over Gladys. Her arms was up over her head. I brung her arms down fast. When my fist hit with a hard blow, just like a prize fighter would use for a knockout, something happened. The lungs pushed in air, and when the arms went up over the head, the lungs pulled in air. God was answering my prayer. I tried to breathe normal. and time the pumping of the arms up and down. God give me strength to move those lifeless, bony arms up and down, up and down. God's miracle. The whole body seemed to be swelling up. The eyes came out forward out of the skull. A pinkish color came into the face. I looked down at Millie. Big tears rolled down her cheeks. She was laughing with joy. Gladys was breathing now. I stopped pumping and got off the bed. She was breathing hard and good. She looked so pretty. All the death was gone. She looked plump again. Soon she opened her eyes and smiled. I did not tell you in this writing all. I asked God to return the Holy Ghost to Gladys. I think back now after 46 years and wonder, did God fill me with the Holy Ghost to hit that lick that restored breathing and life to Gladys? Why did a 13-year-old child use salt? Did the Holy Ghost tell her about salt? Some of these things remain a mystery to me today. God has never let me know. Now I know death, as accepted today, when a doctor signs a death certificate, is a man-made law to bury or do away with a living body. Doctors are afraid of this so-called death. They do not know how to make lasting repairs, because only God can do that. Doctors gives minerals to ease the pain, and like the service station man gives us a tune-up to keep us going. Now let me say the day will come soon when the body's life as we know it today will be stopped. It could be for days, repairs made, blood streams cleaned, and new man-made blood fill the body. Life will be restored, just like awakening from sleep. God will heal the body and the mind. Only God can do that. Persons receiving this kind of operation will live long, healthy, happy lives. Now let me tell you what happened to Mrs. Robinson. After Gladys opened her eyes and smiled, she hugged me. I know God filled her with His Holy Spirit. It was daybreak, and I heard the neighbor's rooster crowing, calling all to start a new day. Gladys never said anything about her death. She got up, dressed, and went downstairs to get breakfast. The children were asleep and never knew what happened in the upper room. Millie must have said something to Marjorie. Marjorie asked me, was Mama really dead? I said, Marjorie, what has happened doesn't matter. All of us have a job to do. That is to help Mama. I believe death was brought on by not having the right food and worry. Worry of the past. Worry where would we get our food for today. The veins in Gladys's legs were ugly, all puffed out and blue. I had no money to go to a doctor. In those days there was no government help. If I could get some whiskey to give her, it might help. Not far from where we lived was a lunchroom. I heard they sold whiskey. It was against the law to sell or have whiskey. I went to the man that run the lunchroom and told him what had happened. He went up a hillside and pulled a large bottle out from under a rock and gave it to me, no charge. He told me he bought the whiskey at a distillery. It was not moonshine. He told me to have her take a tablespoonful of whiskey in a glass of warm, sweetened water at bedtime. It could help her. I know that was an old mountain remedy. I believe it helped keep the blood from clotting during sleep. I don't know. A few months passed, and Gladys gave birth to our 8th baby. On October the 6th, 1931, the new baby was a girl, and Gladys named the baby Betty Gladys. Now little baby Gladys became number one in the family. Marjorie was 10 years old and cared for her baby sister. Lemoyne and Marjorie was in school at Laurel Point. The school and church was close to where we lived. Winter was coming fast, and the depression was felt by everyone. Little money and no work. All the glass factories closed. Teachers working and paid with checks marked no funds. I started walking to Morgantown to look for work. As I was walking down the road, I saw an old coal tipple with a coal bin where trucks could load coal. On the tipple was three men sitting with lights burning on their mining caps. I went up, asked for a job. They laughed at me, looking for work. One of the men asked, "Can you sell coal? We have the bin full. We will give you 20 cents on every ton you sell at $2 a ton delivered into Morgantown." I said, "I will try." On to town I went. I walked 4 hours to houses, talking to people, and sold 1 ton of coal. The next day we delivered the coal. I took my 20 cents and bought hamburger. Gladys could make gravy with the meat. A few days passed, and I sold a few tons of coal. One day the man that run the mine asked me, "Do you want this mine? We have a job cutting mine post and don't want it." So I took the mine, track, cars, tipple, and bin, and plenty of coal, all free of charge. I would pay 20 cents a ton to the people that owned the coal. People I tried to sell coal to asked me how they could order later. We had no telephone. I started to look for a man with a truck to help me. A man, Kenneth Wilts, started to work with me, mining and hauling coal. I traded coal for a telephone. Now we could sell coal. Gladys and me moved in an old house close to mine in Laurel Point. The house had electric lights, but no water. The only water was a pump across the road and up a small bank. With 7 children, it was a big job of hard work carrying water. I sold coal to a man, Max Mathers. He was a printer. When the Depression came, he moved his shop in the basement of his home. Max gave me the idea to give people coal cards with telephone number to call. It worked. The card said, "Morgantown Fuel, clean coal, $2 a ton delivered." Gladys would answer the Morgantown Fuel. Thousands of people called in the next few years. Gladys had a ring in her voice that people liked. One businessman said, "Earl, your wife has the prettiest voice on the phone I've ever heard." The Depression hit bottom. Roosevelt was President of the United States. I was delivering coal to the Coca-Cola Company when the manager came in. He said the last bank just closed. All banks gone. The government closed the last bank to go over the books. And in a few days, one bank reopened. One day I delivered coal to the home of 2 men. They operated a grocery store. I went to the store on Pleasant Street. We had a long talk. I asked them to sell salt side, fatback, yeast, flour, hamburger, liver, and navy beans at cost. If they would do that, I would talk to the coal haulers and see no one went without coal. We made a deal. Liver, 6 pounds, 25 cents. Hamburger, 6 pounds, 25 cents. Flour, 24 pounds bags, 40 cents. The people lived through that bad winter, and no one starved or froze to death. And there was no government help. But God helped us. Now Gladys and me had a little money and plenty to eat until spring came. Then the coal orders stopped. Gladys and me decided to open a lunch stand along the highway at home. I built a pretty little stand, red, white, and blue around the top. Gladys started the stand. Hot dogs, hamburgers, pop candy, cakes, coffee, all 5 cents. Gladys run the lunch stand and coal and filling the bin for next winter. The Blue Ridge bus passed our place. A bus driver we called Frank would blow his horn and wave as he passed, going from Charleston, West Virginia to Cleveland, Ohio. One day Frank pulled in with 2 large buses loaded with and called, "All out for rest and lunch." Over 100 people around a small lunch stand. Gladys always kept a lot of wieners and hot water ready to serve, and hamburgers and cakes ready to warm on the grill. Marjorie opened pop and handed out candy and cakes. When Frank pulled out, he was happy, as we were. Years before, we rode with Frank at Arnesville when I worked at the mine and had the flying circus. Gladys was all in, sold out, so we closed the stand for the day. She sent Lemoyne down the highway to a slaughterhouse to get wieners, called the Coca-Cola company to send out pop. Gladys could do anything that needed to be done, but best of all, she was a good mother and a wife, and liked people. I never met a person that did not like Gladys. Our trouble was not over. One morning, Gladys was walking across the kitchen floor. I was looking at her, when she stopped and slapped the back of her neck with her hand. She fell like she was shot. Her and looked at the back of the neck where she hit. There, in the hollow of the neck, was a knot about the size of a small bird egg. I rubbed this place as hard as I could across the neck. Another blood clot, I guess. She came to in about a minute and went about her work. She seemed to know nothing of what happened. She did not know she had fell. Winter came and Gladys was back at the telephone taking orders for coal. 6 days a week I hauled coal with a crank. When the coal went down to zero, I could not turn the crank. I would heat tubs of water on the coal stove boiling hot, put old potato sacks over the engine, and pour buckets after buckets of hot water over the sacks, pull the choke out, stand on the crank and push down, and turn the motor over. Fill the radiator with boiling water and cover it. I would turn the key on, pull up on the crank, and the motor would start. Hauling coal with those old trucks was hard work, fixing flat tires, replacing rear ends on the road in the snow. Sometimes I would break off a wheel. This all went in with life, and I expected it. Christmas 1932, to the mountains and loaded 2 trucks with Christmas trees. Gladys sold the trees at the lunch stand. If anyone did not have money, they received the prettiest tree of all. We had a real nice Christmas. After the holiday, Gladys was back at the telephone taking orders for coal. We was hauling all the coal we could mine. On the 13th day of March, 1933, Gladys gave birth to our nice baby, a pretty little baby girl, plump and healthy. Gladys named the baby Phyllis Sue. The children welcomed Sue into the family of Robinsons. Sue had lots of hair and a big smile, 10 baby fingers and 10 baby toes. All little babies are beautiful. Phyllis Sue was born at 2 a.m. in the morning. The doctor walked out of the house on the road in front of the house. He looked at the sky. It looked bluish. The moon was round and bright. We lived between 2 hills. White clouds were floating just over the top of the hills. They were low and moving fast. The doctor asked me what it meant, those clouds so low and traveling so fast. March winds, I guess. Well, I must be getting back to town, the doctor said. It will soon be time to get up. I went to baby Sue. We were soon asleep. Late that day, I woke to see a state police standing by our bed. He had wakened me. You had better get up. There is a flood. The water is up to the floor. Mrs. Robinson, you lay still. We left you sleep as long as possible with the baby. If it becomes necessary, we will move you out. We have plenty of help out there and a high-wheel truck out there. We are watching closely. We do not want to move you. We hope the flood is at its worst. I went to the kitchen door. Water was over the porch floor, splashing in the kitchen. Water was everywhere. The concrete road was under water. The water was moving fast. There went a piano, all broken up. The small house hit a big tree. A cloudburst of water miles up the valley picked up haystacks and lodged them against a bridge, forming a dam. The water backed up and picked up a big house and slammed it against the bridge, breaking it to pieces. County and state work crews cleaned the bridges and let the water go down. By evening, the flood water was gone. Our house was sitting on a bed of rocks. All dirt was gone. Flowers and grass washed away. Nothing but rocks. Lemoyne, the oldest boy, was only 12 years old. He helped me load dirt from along the road in a wheelbarrow. For days we worked wheeling dirt to cover the rocks and made a yard for the children to play. After we covered the rocks, we dug sod and sprigged the yard. By the middle of summer, we had a green lawn for the children to play on. We planted trees, and they were in leaf and are growing good. In writing Mrs. Robinson, I have not told you about the real Mrs. Robinson. She was a beautiful, happy girl. She would play drop the handkerchief and ring around the rosy with the children. She played ball with the boys. She would tell them stories and laugh at the playful things they did and said. One time Lemoyne was playing with a rag doll in the rain barrel full of water. He pulled the doll out, all dripping wet, and said, "Georgie Washington, has you been swimming?" Gladys would tell the children years later about Georgie Washington been swimming and laugh. This is what made our life worth living. Gladys would see the children dressed neat and clean and off to Sunday school. Sunday meant a lot to Gladys. Visiting Bald Hill years later, she stood at the church door and told me how they gave her a prize award for attending Sunday school 3 years without missing a Sunday. How she played the organ in church. Gladys was one of the best in spelling and was a big help teaching her children. All of Gladys's children are good in school because she spent a lot of time teaching at home. Living in Laurel Point was a hard life. Lemoyne and Marjorie carrying water from the pump across the road. It was hard work. They never complained. Cutting wood for the cook stove, carrying buckets of coal. Every child helped. They all worked together. Even baby Sue helped by seldom crying. Her laughter made us all happy. We had a big old rocking chair. I would take 2 children on my lap and 2 children sitting on the arms of the chair. The children all wanted to ride the chair arms. They called it riding the fenders. We would rock and sing. Many, many, many happy moments were spent in that old rocking chair. Fall came again. The apple trees were full of fruit, plenty of plums and pears. Farmers were busy making hay and husking corn. Potatoes were being dug and stored for winter. Girls were busy canning vegetables and fruit, making apple butter and sauerkraut. We had a small garden. It helped some. Gladys would go to Bald Hill and pick cherries and peaches and put them in jars for winter. How good those pies tasted when the snow was on and the north wind blew so hard over the mountains. Gladys would open a jar of peaches and make pies, hot biscuits for breakfast, and the big loaves of bread coated with cow's butter. Gladys baked the best bread I ever ate. The children loved Mother's cooking. How strong the children were, eating home-baked bread and soup beans. If anything helped us through the Depression, it was soup beans and those little navy beans. Cold weather brung orders for coal. People would call on the phone and say, "Mrs. Robinson, we would like you to fill our coal bin." Hundreds of people that never saw Gladys knew her voice over the phone. Gladys remembered their names and where they lived and asked how the children were. It was good for Gladys. She enjoyed telling me in the evening about talking to the people. She knew them all. It was a cold winter. Ice froze 6 inches deep on the concrete road, 12 below zero for weeks. We fired the grates at home night and day. Ice would freeze in the kitchen with fires burning. One late afternoon, I went home to see if Gladys needed anything. Gladys was all excited. She said, "Hurry home, the house is on fire." I asked how long it had been burning. "Hurry home." I drove the 4 miles to Laurel Point and found what she said was true. The neighbors carried water and filled tubs in the front room. Gladys smelled wood burning in the living room and saw smoke coming up through the floorboards in front of the fireplace. She bored a hole through the flooring and put a rubber hose in the hole and put a funnel in the hose. Marjorie and Lemoyne and Gladys poured water in the funnel all day. It prevented the fire from spreading. The neighbors said they were afraid to cut a hole into the fire. If it got air, it could burn the house down. I cut the axe into the fire. It was a large log under the hearth in front of the grates on fire. We poured buckets of water on the log and put the fire out. Firing the grate with coal night and day, red hot, lit the log. Not much happiness at our house that night. Gladys kept the water tank on the back of the cook stove hot, full of water. Hauling coal all day, then putting out the fire, I was dirty. I filled the wash tub with warm water in the kitchen, and soon was cleaned up and ready to eat. Gladys put supper on the table, hot cornbread and cow's butter, and good old soup beans. After supper, we all sat in the living room. The children told me how Mom kept the house from burning, how hard they worked. And they were right. She did a good job putting water on the fire without giving it air. It was a big job finding food for 11 of us, 30 meals every day. The money I earned mining and hauling coal would buy a lot of food, so I liked the cold, snowy weather. Spring came, June the 10th, 1934, and Gladys gave birth to our 10th baby. Another beautiful little baby girl. Gladys named the new baby Norma Lee. The baby, like all our children, was perfect. God's best gift to us. Healthy, well-developed babies. Norma was number one now. One of the first things the children did was to try to get the new baby to smile. And when that first smile came, they all rejoiced. It was the starting of a new life, all the same life, Mrs. Robinson. Every day brings something new for all of us.